Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start our video with a story about a new graduate, an overzealous manager, and a clever workaround that made the best out of a difficult situation. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with a turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Corporate sales chaos. So way back in 2011, I graduated from college and got my first job. It was all great and all to begin with, and then I got a new manager. He pushed me into corporate sales against my wishes, but I guess I didn't have much of a choice, what with it being my first job, and got with the program. Now, usually in corporate sales, you have to play the long game. Make contacts in companies, talk with procurement heads, maintain and nurture relationships, basically whore yourself out and hope the procurement guys remember you when the company decides to buy cars for the C-suite fat cats. Now, my manager had an idiotic approach to corporate sales. He wanted us to go and meet 7 to 8 new company reps a day. Now, these people are those who don't give appointments easily, and realistically, doing 7 to 8 meetings a week made more practical sense. But no, sir. Our man wanted us to just pop up at corporate offices like door-to-door salesmen and request to meet corporate reps just like that. I told my boss this just didn't make any sense when the cars you're trying to sell cost upwards of $50,000 and go up to $150,000, Audis. But the dude just would not relent. He would insist on us showing and visiting cards of the reps we met at the end of each week and told us, "I don't want you sitting around in an office, be out in the field doing meetings." I just started popping up at corporate offices, asking the receptionist for the visiting card of the person concerned, dropped off a brochure for the rep, and boom, left. My 8-hour day turned into a 4-hour day. Submitted those cards at the end of each week. This went on for months before upper management found out, and my then manager left. Smart managers help you be successful for the company. Dumb managers think they can be successful by being unreasonable jerks. And our second story. You should think about what you want. Okay. I used to be a firefighter for a volunteer department. The town was small and nothing happened on most days, but I was young and single and I loved the job. I showed up every single time I could. The only person who was there more than me was the chief. As many volunteer firefighters know, when grandma falls down at 3 a.m., you get 1 or 2 people, but if there's a fire, people you haven't seen in months suddenly have enough time to show up. Anyway, that department was a mess. People were always crap-talking and backstabbing. Training was a joke. You were lucky to get a PowerPoint once a week. Stuff was stolen often. There was once a whole political coup for some reason. Somebody really wanted power in a small-town department in the middle of nowhere. I learned it was best to just stay quiet and do my job, and that was helped when I went to night shifts at my real job. I was working 12-plus hour shifts, sometimes 5 or 6 days a week. I still showed up to every run I could, but after 7 years there, I was just done with it all. Everything came to a head when I was scheduled 28 12-hour shifts out of a 30-day month. I was still the second most active member out of 30 people, but I wasn't kissing the appropriate butts, and the management kept trying to get me in trouble. They once threatened to fire me for not turning in some paperwork, and I had to point out that paperwork had been sitting in their mailbox for 3 days. They eventually decided to add a stupid new rule. You were now required to sit at the station for 40 unpaid hours a month. Not doing so could lead to discipline and termination. I didn't bother. I was about 24 shifts into the month and did not care about their dumb rule, but I realized that I could make it, so I left work, grabbed a change of clothes, and went to the department. It was about noon, which was midnight to me since I worked nights. I tried to sleep on the rock-hard beds they provided. Not 30 minutes went by when the training officer kicked the door in and demanded that I get up and help with training. My role? I sat on a hose so it didn't move while somebody else practiced the pump controls. A sandbag could have done just as well. An hour later, training finished, and I tried to go back to sleep. I was told off again. I ended up hiding in the TV room so I could have some peace and quiet. They found me again and wrote me up. First time in years, for what amounted to not being enthusiastic enough about the job. I endured a lecture while trying not to fall asleep where I stood. I finally got to sit down when I got a text from the boss at my real job. They wanted me to work that night and wondered if I was available. I thought, you know what? I am available. and I left. A few days later, I got a nasty email from one of the guys who wrote me up telling me they didn't like my attitude and that I needed to think about what I wanted. I thought about it, and I realized I didn't want to deal with their crap anymore, so I wrote my resignation letter, went back to the station, gathered my personal effects, and never went back. You were there more than anyone for 7 years, and suddenly you're enemy number one? How did that happen? Plus, how enthusiastic are you supposed to act for an unpaid job? It's a shame, but good thing you got out. And our next story. This is what happens when you worked retail too long. A long time ago, I used to work in an educational toy store in my local mall. After it closed down, I had to find new places to shop for the kids in my life. I'd gotten a nephew of mine started on a scale wood Thomas the Train toy line when someone I knew told me Barnes & Noble had started carrying the line, so I decided to swing by to see what new pieces had come out for the holidays. Once there, I started looking and overheard two women talking about if they should be getting their kids started because both kids love Thomas the Train. Before I could stop myself, I'd introduced myself, and when I mentioned the store I'd worked at, they both lit up, suddenly remembering they'd seen me there. Now they're asking questions, and I'm giving advice. About the time they're done, more people have started asking me questions. Before I know it, I've been standing in about the same spot for more than an hour, just selling the heck out of these trains. When the crowd finally dispersed, I make sure I have the two pieces I wanted and start to head to the register, only to find the department manager, the store manager, standing there, along with the girl actually working the kids section, staring at me. To make this faster, let's call store manager SM, department manager DM, the employee E, and me's obvious. At that point, realizing the spectacle I had unintentionally created, I walked over expecting to apologize, only to have the SM start talking before me. SM, do you realize how much of that stuff you sold? Me. So that guy did buy the Roundhouse set? So you know that set was at the time their biggest set and cost $500? SM, actually he did, but I'm talking about more than that. You've sold more Thomas the Train items than we've ever sold. Unable to stop myself, I replied, well, you haven't carried the line that long. Once your people learn more about it, I'm sure you'll have better numbers. SM, do you want a job as assistant manager in this department? DM, more than half of those people thought you already worked here. They wanted you to get a raise. E, I don't understand how you knew all that. I could barely follow half of it. Me, thanks. How much would it pay? Okay, this got away from me, so let's try for a quick finish. I turned the job down. It was offering less money than my job at the time. I ended up being given the employee discount on the two pieces I wanted as a thank you. For about 2 years, every time I went into that Barnes & Noble, I would see one of the managers from that day, and they'd ask me if I needed any more train items. Should have told him you'd come in when you have time and sell for 25% commission. Setting your own hours. And our next story. Ignore the time difference in the evening? I'll ignore it in the morning. Not me, but my father-in-law's story. In the 1970s, before email and faxes, my father-in-law, Carl, worked as a trust agent for a bank in the Midwest, which is on Eastern Time. He handled trusts and estates for bank customers, including one older lady. Her son-in-law, Bruton, lived in California, which is on Pacific Time, 3 hours behind Carl, and managed his mother-in-law's estate on her behalf. Bruton used to call Carl with questions, which is not a problem, except Bruton would call Carl at home at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, expecting him to answer questions. Carl would be at home eating dinner or spending time with his family, so Bruton's calls were unwelcome. Carl would explain the time difference and said that Bruton should call before 5 p.m. Eastern Time, not Pacific Time. But Bruton always ignored Carl's requests and demanded that Carl call him back first thing in the morning. Carl was nice and would wait until 11 a.m. Eastern Time to give Bruton time to get settled in his own office, until he decided he'd had enough. The day after Bruton's latest call, Carl went into his office extra early, got the information, then promptly at 8 a.m., Carl called Bruton's house. Sleepy Bruton answered the phone and croaked, "Hello?" "Good morning, Bruton," Carl all but hollered into the phone. "What time is it?" Bruton groaned. "It's 8 o'clock, Carl said. "But it's 5 o'clock in the morning here." "Huh, so it is. I guess there's a 3-hour time difference. But you said you wanted these answers first thing in the morning, and it's 8 o'clock here, so I thought I'd give you a call. Bruton never called past 5 p.m. again. Sometimes the only solution is to make it their problem instead of yours. And our last story. Neighbor trying to steal land. My partner and I are buying our first property. It's not in a conservation area, nor is it a listed building. The property is the second in a row of 4 terraced houses. When we viewed the property, I bought copies of the title sheets and plan from the Registers of Scotland. I also got copies for both immediate neighbors to check for land area and confirm that the boundaries are in agreement, and they are. Our boundary extends about 4 or 5 feet beyond our neighbor's building at the front. This has been reflected in Google Street View images over the past decade or so. When we viewed the property, our land within the boundary had distinctive stone chippings, while the neighbor in question had grass. There was no fence or dividing wall, but there was a small red plastic divider running not along the land boundary, but where our houses meet. I'm assuming it was to make it look like the land was theirs. This divider was not in place on the Street View image from 2009. We placed our offer about 3 weeks ago, and it's been accepted. The mortgage has been approved, and we have a move-in date of mid-September. However, last weekend, the neighbor erected a fence about 4 feet into what will be our garden and replaced all their grass and the land they've grabbed from us with new chipping stones. This involved removing what would be our chippings and a bush. It's a blatant land grab to try and align their garden with where our houses join. Our front garden is small as it is, and we were planning on monoblocking this area as part of a new driveway. We've raised the issue with our solicitor, and they've communicated this to the sellers, who've been in touch with the neighbor. The neighbor's apparently refusing to either remove or move their fence to the correct border. Update. After a few stressful weeks, we finally have some good news regarding the boundary dispute with our neighbor. Our solicitor managed to expedite the process, and we now have a resolution that puts the issue to rest. The evidence from the title sheets, land survey, and historical Google Street View images clearly demonstrated that our boundary extends about 4 to 5 feet over from what the neighbor had encroached upon. Armed with this information, our solicitor contacted the neighbor with a formal letter demanding the removal of the fence and restoration of our property. Initially, the neighbor continued to refuse, but the threat of legal action and the undeniable proof of the boundary in our favor finally forced their hand. They removed the fence last weekend and restored the stone chippings and bush they'd removed. Furthermore, as part of the resolution, the neighbor was compelled to compensate us for the damage caused by their actions. This included covering the cost of any professional help we had to engage to rectify the situation, as well as an additional amount for the inconvenience and stress caused. While this experience has certainly been a test of our patience and resolve, we're relieved now that it's behind us. We're moving forward with our plans to monoblock the front garden for our new driveway, and the CCTV installation will ensure we have peace of mind going forward. Despite the rocky start, we're excited to move into our new home and look forward to creating many happy memories here. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and support throughout this ordeal. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.